How would you like a golf simulator in your very own home? Well, this is Dylan, a two-handicap golfer who built this professional home simulator all by himself and on a budget. After booking in for a one-to-one call with me for some advice on building home simulators, I caught up with him to check in, see how he did it, how much he spent, and if it's actually helping to improve his golf game. But Dylan's setup isn't perfect, and he told me something that he wishes that he really hadn't done. But more about that later. So first and foremost, Dylan, why did you decide to build a golf simulator?
The biggest piece of it is I'm a competitive guy, grew up playing competitively in high school, did not play nearly as much in college. And when I became an adult, realized that a lot of my friends who I was used to beating were kicking the crap out of me at our club. So part of that is because, spent a lot of long hours working and went to a club that was really far away. So just didn't have a ton of opportunity to practice. Figured this would be an opportunity for me to really improve my game, get rid of any excuses I had, and put myself in a position to hopefully win a little bit of money off of the guys who had been taking my money for many, many years.
Is it the basement where you said you've built your golf sim?
It is the basement. I mean, it's still somewhat above ground, probably around where my shoulder is around ground level now. We live in Metro Atlanta and we live inside the perimeter. So finding a place with a 10-foot ceiling basement was going to be very, very difficult, even though that was very much on my list of requirements for a house. What we were able to find, though, was a house with a garage, and then off to the side of the garage, probably 400 square feet of what was considered crawl space, but was already sitting at, call it 8 to 9 feet with dirt floors and unfinished ceilings. So realized we could dig that out to where we needed it to be, while at the same time expanding the square footage of the house and having it be a worthwhile investment on our end.
What are the dimensions of the full room?
Full room, I believe it's 25 or 26 feet long and about 13 feet wide. So again, we built it specifically to fit the simulator. Can just have enough room for righties and lefties to hit. I'm a righty, so 99.9% of the swings are taken from the right-handed spot, which is very comfortable. And then ceilings, we did 10 foot 6 inches. Once we actually put the ceiling material in and put the matting on the floor, ends up with about 10 feet of room between floor to ceiling, which gives us plenty of room to hit driver.
I love how you've chosen your house based on golf simulator space.
I have a very, very lovely, well, my fiance was actually my girlfriend at the time, and certainly many, many, many reasons why we are now getting married, but her understanding and encouragement of my dumb hobbies like this are certainly a good piece of that.
Can you talk us through your setup now, Dylan, in terms of the equipment and kind of what you bought? Now, if we start with the launch monitor, what launch monitor have you gone for and why?
I went with the Bushnell Launch Pro. My thought process there is every Tour Pro that I see is using a GC quad. I did not have the room behind me because I'm sitting in a seating area that we use as a theater right now. Did not have the room behind me to put in a radar launch monitor that was going to have enough ball flight. I also wanted my hitting area to be closer to the screen to create a little bit more of an immersive experience. So I'm about anywhere between 7 to 9 feet away from the screen at any given time. So a camera-based system was going to make the most sense. Wanted something that was portable, knew that Bushnell and Foresight created a really fantastic system on a budget, and again was able to find one at a reasonable discount. So have been just thrilled with the Launch Pro. The screen itself, I believe, is 9'6". It's about 8'6" and about 12.5 wide. So my dimensions might be off there. I know I went with a 16 by 10 screen, which ends up being the resolution of my projector as well. But the goal here was to fill up as much of the space as possible while keeping it safe. I did mount it to where it's about 6 inches off of the ground. Part of that was just to make it a little bit easier to watch movies on it instead of having it fall all the way down. And then have about a foot of room, give or take, between my ceiling and the top of the screen.
Where did you get your screen from?
Yeah, I got the Shop Indoor Golf Shop. So I used the highest end of the Shop Indoor Golf screens. That was one area where I was more than happy to pay very much of a premium to get the best possible screen. in part, I tell you, my fiance was very much on board with me building a golf simulator. She 100% was. One of the ways I was able to convince her, which she calls the Dylan Green propaganda machine, is that we are using this, and we do use this all the time as a theater room. So wanted to make sure that everything would look really good with movies, TV shows, etc. down here on that screen. The projector I went with, it's an Optima. It ended up not being a 4K projector. We may upgrade to that at some point, but the price difference between the two was just so massive. But we can't tell the difference. On this big of a screen, maybe the upgrade would make a difference, but there's just no complaints about the resolution whatsoever, in large part because we made sure that we went with a premium screen. We had this thing up and running on New Year's Day 2024, and one of the first things we did was go watch the college football playoff on this, and it was just surreal how good everything looked. I mean, it felt like a 200-inch TV, and even after taking a couple years of abuse and a lot of drivers being pumped into this thing, you can't tell at all that it's ever been used for golf.
I think the last thing I want to ask you about is your hitting mat. Which one have you gone for? Where did you get it from? And how are you finding it?
So I went with one that's a little bit off the beaten path. I went with a company called Bullseye Golf and went with their soft strike mat. So it's similar to the Country Club Elite, which is, one of it's mainly turf. You can stick a tee in it. Just has a little bit more padding than the Country Club Elite. The reason I went with this one is because the height of it was perfect to fit in seamlessly to my subfloor and turf. So I used 1-inch foam as a subfloor across the entire room, put 3/8 inch or whatever it is putting turf, and then just cut a rectangular hole to put in this hitting mat, and it really fits in seamlessly, accepts a real tee. It gives you really solid feedback on thin shots and fat shots. But the biggest thing is I can putt on it, and there's no bump between the hitting area and the actual turf. So actually playing a round of simulator golf feels a little bit more realistic versus if I were to putt and have the ball fall off a small cliff.
One thing that I do want to ask you about is your swing cameras. They can be quite an expensive piece of kit, but you went full on budget and you went and got some swing cameras from AliExpress over in China. How have you found them?
They've been great. I use the AliExpress cameras. I have 2 of them, one down the line, one face on. Actually, you may be able to see on that end. The resolution isn't good enough, but I keep one TV over there on Canovia, which is a free software that you can use for swing recording. Hooked all of those up to the computer, and then hooked a microphone up from the computer that goes to the hitting area. Programmed Canovia so that swinging the club and hitting the ball triggers the cameras to record. And on that screen that's in front of me every time that I hit, I'm able to get an instant replay of every swing that I take, which if you're really working through some stuff and want to get deep into your stats and deep into, hey, why was my swing path 2 degrees out versus 1 degree in, if that's what you're going for, having the ability to see all of that in high resolution is just a tremendous luxury. And everything's on a 2-second delay, so it ends up, every swing I get a slow motion replay that starts pretty much right at my takeaway. That was one thing I was worried about with the Bushnell Launch Pro and with GS Pro is there doesn't really seem to be a great camera interface that is native to those softwares. But Canovia as a secondary software runs in the background, doesn't take up too much power, and it is really, it's really purpose built for sports analysis. So once you learn your way around it, is every bit as effective as any other software out there at just a fraction of the price versus, I can't remember, like Swing Caddy or something like that. One of those players that makes you use their own cameras and their own software.
Before you built your golf sim, you and I had a little call, didn't we? And you was after a little bit of advice in terms of your golf simulator setup and planning it and how to build it. So how was I able to help you with that?
You helped me tremendously in terms of the entire design. I'm not sure if you remember, but on our call, we started upstairs in my office and then came downstairs, and you saw what was effectively a blank canvas, a concrete room with a couple of walls here. What you helped me understand was first and foremost where to start. I wanted to know what kind of screen dimensions would make sense for me to maximize the space. I think I even got out a tape measure and we talked about what kind of clearance I would need from the ceiling and where I wanted the screen to potentially hit the floor. You helped me understand how it would be possible to build out a custom frame using angle iron and wood rather than buying out one of these frames from Carl's Place or wherever, which ended up being a great decision. It gave this whole thing a much more seamless feel. And then we talked a lot about equipment. I really had no idea what the difference between those NVIDIA processors would be. You helped me understand really the why behind a lot of equipment rather than just the what. So what I mean by that is, hey, if you go with this processor or this computer or this camera or this projector, these are the tangible benefits you're going to get versus just saying, yeah, you can spend more and it'll be better, but not really knowing what better truly means. So, we talked through just about every piece of equipment in the room, from the computer to the cameras, to the launch monitor, and to the projector. And I ended up coming away with just a much better understanding of why I needed to spend money on certain things versus where were the areas where I could spend a little bit less and still get the kind of quality and the kind of performance that I was looking for. So really helped me understand not only how to build this thing out, but where I could spend my money and get the most bang for my buck. And I ended up being just, tremendously pleased with ultimately where the capital was deployed, so to speak, and where, the equipment that I ended up going with on your advice.
Brilliant, mate. I love that. And I think when I do these consultations and these calls, it's very much about the whole understanding of the different components, like you say, rather than just buying something because somebody tells you to buy it, especially with a golf sim as well, because it's very much an upgradable thing that you've got, and it's an ongoing build that you're constantly going to want to make better. By understanding each component, you know what you might want to upgrade in the future and why you would want to upgrade it and how it's going to make the performance of your whole golf simulator better. So yeah, that's very much what I try to convey in these calls that we have and the online course that I do. It's definitely something that I want people to understand rather than just go somewhere and buy it and not really know anything about what you're buying.
You gave me the crash course that made me feel very qualified to not only make the right decisions for myself, but even give buddies of mine who are now trying to emulate what I've built the right advice for their specific needs. You can always use AI to ask, what do you need? But the what is really only half the battle. And at this point now, when I have friends asking me, they come and see this, then they want to build their own. They always ask me and they go, well, hey, can I get away with cheaping out on X, Y, or Z? The answer is, well, you could, but you really need to understand at a deeper level what these components, how these components, more expensive or less expensive, are going to affect the overall experience. And Mitch, that's where you just have such a wealth of experience that that gives us a really good idea of where we're going to get bang for our buck.
If you'd like to learn exactly how to build a home golf simulator setup that is bespoke to your room size and dimensions, then book in for a one-to-one call with me using the links in the description below. Alternatively, if you'd rather do it all yourself, then I've got some resources also in the description that walk you step by step through exactly how to build a home golf simulator so you can start working on your game and playing recreations of world famous courses from the comfort of your very own home. You're obviously a very good golfer. What has been the best thing about having a golf simulator in your house?
Oh, it's just been able to really drill down on certain things you're working on your swing and understand, again, the why behind your misses and your good shots versus just the what. And what I mean by that is if I'm not hitting the driver well, I can stand down here and say I'm not leaving until I hit 20 drives in a row or 10 drives in a row that are within a 30 yard width and over a certain distance. Really get the feel for that. Look at the swings that are good, and then if I hit a bad shot, being able to either look at the cameras and say, okay, this is the move that caused this to go left or go right, or just look at my stats from GS Pro, face angle, side spin, launch angle, etc., and be able to see, all right, clearly what happened is I came too far from the inside or I closed the face. This is why I think I'm closing the face, confirm that on camera, and then know exactly what you need to work on at any given time. And it's just made me way more consistent as a player. You know, and again, the scores are only going to reflect how much practice you actually put into it. But having the luxury of being able to come down here and really work deliberately on my game is something that I'd never really even been able to do at a driving range, because I don't have all the same technology to be able to help me understand where the misses are coming from and where the good shots are coming from. That is one more thing I want to say as a benefit of the simulator. With GS Pro, you have access to the Simulator Golf Tour. This isn't a plug for them. I like using it. You know, if you're a guy like me that used to play competitively and now the most competition you get is the occasional member guest or, you know, a $20 Nassau, being able to actually put yourself under pressure is also a tremendous luxury. And it's either if you're just playing a normal round and, you know, you think you're a few under par and need to make a couple of birdies to shoot a career best, or if you're playing one of these Simulator Golf Tour tournaments and you know that your world ranking, which is actually really fun to track, ends up being on the line, you know, in the final few holes of a tournament, taking some swings under pressure, feeling like you're under the gun. Only way you ever get better at that is to put yourself in more of those situations. And this has allowed me to put myself in those situations way more often than I would have if I'm just, you know, playing my game with my buddies.
I can't agree any more with that. The Simulator Golf Tour, it adds a completely new dimension to not only your golf simulator, but your practice as well, like you say. I remember before I had GS Pro, I was using the Golf Club 2019, and it was amazing because you can play all of these world-famous courses, and it was fun, and you can try and shoot a good score. But as soon as I got the Simulator Golf Tour and GS Pro, all of a sudden there was like an extra, like, large amount of pressure on every single shot, because you're up against something and it means something every single shot. And if you're just playing a casual round, very similar to real life golf, if you're playing a casual round with your buddies and you hit a bad shot, then yeah, it's bad shot and it annoys you, but then it doesn't mean anything. But as soon as you've got something to play for, like playing on the tour, whether it's getting a few more positions up the leaderboard or getting a decent world golf ranking, then it means something and it puts that pressure onto your game, and that's only going to be beneficial for you when you go to play real golf as well. So when it came to building your golf sim, Dylan, did you have a specific budget in mind or not?
I did. Definitely was trying to do this on a budget. You know, wanted to keep things below $10,000 while still having a very, you know, luxurious high-end feel. Like I mentioned, I did this in conjunction with purchasing my first house with my fiance. The big piece of the build, though, was actually building out the space that we're in now, because previously this was crawl space. So given that a lot of money went into that, I tried to be as economical as I could in the actual simulator build.
Dylan, is there anything in your setup that you would change or potentially upgrade in the future?
One thing I am going to do is upgrade the surrounding of the impact screen. So, you know, what I did, and this was sort of coming towards the end of the budget and in the end of the build, wanting to do something quick and cheap, just bought these 1-inch foam sound deadening panels and stuck them along the ceiling, stuck them along the side and on the side of, the side wall, and then on the side of the simulator itself. That stuff looks okay for a little bit, then the adhesive starts to fail, then the foam starts to degrade, and it doesn't really provide a whole lot of protection. So, you know, one of my friends came in who is not a particularly good golfer, hit a drive and caught it off of the crown of the club, popped it right up, went through the foam padding, through my ceiling, and hit a water pipe.
Wow.
And thankfully, you know, in my basement, the water shutoff is right there, so that there wasn't any damage or anything like that. But, you know, you can imagine my horror as I'm looking at my simulator and seeing water just falling from my ceiling. So that gave me some inspiration to upgrade to, plywood and mattress topper and vinyl, and build something that's going to look a little bit better and actually provide some real protection of my ceiling.
Oh, mate, I bet you was absolutely devastated when that happened. I would have panicked like mad.
Well, you know, it was my cousin, actually, and thankfully his dad's a contractor. So, you know, once I shut off the water, I looked at him and I go, all right, Call your dad. He's fixing the pipe.
Mate, how unlucky is it that it hit your water pipe as well?
A total freak accident. But it's one of those things where you look at it and go, well, this happened. There's nothing I can do about it. This is the life that I'm living today, and you clean it up and move on. And it got me out of. I think I had some plans that evening that I didn't want to go into, and I was able to say, hey, my house just flooded, so I got to deal with that.
If you could give some advice to any newbies that are thinking about building a golf simulator, what would be your best piece of advice that you'd give them?
Prioritize the screen. So work backwards a little bit, prioritize the screen, figure out how you want to do that, and then figure out how that's going to dictate what the rest of the room looks like. Say start with that most important piece and really try not to compromise on the screen first and foremost and the dimensions of the room that you want. And then the other piece is to really think about it from a holistic design perspective. Think about what you want the room to look like when you walk through the door, look to your left and look to your right. Make sure that what you're designing is going to have a layout that's conducive not only to you hitting balls, but a layout to people hanging out behind you and being able to have multiple people in the room at any given time. If you want to add cameras, making sure that you leave space in the right spots in order to be able to mount cameras at the correct height. Leaving plenty of room so that people don't feel claustrophobic as they're swinging a driver, particularly if you're someone that's a little bit taller. I know that advice really just sounds like, hey, go ahead and build something that looks good, but it really is almost this measure twice, cut once mentality of design everything out on paper as best you possibly can, starting with the most important components that you can then build around, and then go ahead and actually build it versus trying to shoehorn an impact screen into a space that isn't really going to work with it, or, putting in a screen and then a mat, but not having anything around it that makes it a place that other people are going to want to come and hang out as well.
I'm sure you'll agree that Dylan's setup looks absolutely amazing. And if you're interested in building a home golf simulator of your own, then check out my links in the description to my online course, my downloadable ebook, and even book in for a one-to-one call with me, just like Dylan did. And if you'd like to see some more inspirational golf simulator setups, then watch this video on the screen right now, subscribe to Handicap Golf, and I will hopefully see you over there in a moment.